main agenda of the session is we would be discussing how to study for FRM Part II. So my presentation should take approximately 20 minutes or maybe 25. And I would be discussing some of the important concepts, study strategies, sequence, which books to use, those kind of things. And then once I'm done with my presentation, then we would be spending another 30 minutes for Q&A. So if you people have queries in terms of how to prepare, if you have queries in terms of how to manage your timetable, then I'll be happy to answer them. Now, there are two ways in which you can ask your queries. One is you'd see a chat box. You can simply keep on posting your queries on the Zoom chat box. Or alternatively, you can also raise your hand. I can enable your audio and you should be able to ask me. In case if you're planning on speaking, I'll recommend that you get a decent mic or even a regular earphones will work so that it will capture your audio properly. All right, so with this background, I'm going to get started right away. What I did today in the morning is I kind of made this presentation and I broke it down into 4 important pieces. So first, I'm going to discuss about how your syllabus is being organized in terms of subjects. What is the weight, which you probably would already know. But some little more in terms of what is the size of the subject, how big or small the subject is, and what is a perceived level of difficulty. So we'll have some discussion on syllabus. Then I'll also be discussing on what is a good sequence in terms of which subject to do first, which subject to do second. What I've also done is prepared some sort of a timetable for you people. So I've taken a window of 4 months and tried to put in my recommended sequence into some sort of a schedule. So I'll be sharing that with you. Then we will discuss what study material is available, which books to read or what questions to practice. And then we would have some discussion on the some general tips for the FRM Part II. Okay, so that's the background. Let's get started with the syllabus overview first. So I'm sure you guys already know that we're looking at a total of 5 or 6 subjects. I like to look at them as 6 separate subjects. So what we have market risk, we have credit risk, operational risk, liquidity and treasury, which is a new addition in your 2020 curriculum. And then we have investment and risk management, and then we have current issues. Okay, so roughly this is how it's a good way of looking at your syllabus. These are the weights. So these top 3 subjects, which is market, credit, and operational, they contribute about 60%, and then remaining 40% comes from these 3 subjects, which is liquidity, investment, and current issues. Now, how many readings do we have in each of the subject? So these are the number of readings. So we have 16 readings here, 20, 26, 19, 10, and 10. So what I did is I went ahead and I counted the number of pages we have in the GAR and in the Schwezer books. Okay, so which book to use, we'll have some discussion around it. But these are the number of pages of GAR, and these are the number of pages in Schwezer's or the Kaplan material. Now, what I also went ahead and did is I tried to calculate in order to get one particular question on the exam, on an average, how many number of pages do you want to read? So this particular calculation I did from Kaplan. So my methodology was very simple. I said we have 80 questions on the FRM Part II, and 20% of weight would essentially mean 16 questions. And we have total of 204 pages here. So on an average, how many pages do you want to study per question? So this is how the number comes out. So if you can observe, there are certain pieces, for example, investment management and market risk, and even current issues for that matter, where you're written on the number of pages you want to read per question is substantially lower. And credit risk, operational risk, and liquidity risk, the size of material that you want to cover for a particular question is going to be substantially larger. And I think this is something that we should keep in mind when we are preparing a schedule for ourselves. So I have already incorporated this. I'll show that to you. Then what I have also been doing throughout the week is I've been talking to candidates who have taken exams in the past, and trying to get some idea on what is, their view about a particular subject, like an overview, so that we can build a good perception on this. So market risk, on an average, in terms of how you view the subject, is there are a lot of calculations. It is conceptual, and in general, what candidates would recommend is that we should have strong background in the certain concepts of FRM Part 1. So if you're good with FRM Part 1, generally market risk becomes relatively easy to handle. In terms of level of difficulty, I've classified them into easy, moderate, and difficult. So most of the candidates would put market risk as in the moderate category. So it's not too difficult, but it's also not something that you get through with easily. You have to put in some efforts to acquire the concepts. Credit risk has chunks of theory and chunks of calculation. It is quite lengthy, and the level of difficulty given was D here, difficult. Operational risk, theory, lengthy, boring. These are the adjectives a lot of candidates used. It requires a lot of revisions because you tend to forget, so you need frequent reviews. And some of the tips given were make use of the post-its, like those sticky notes, or maybe audio notes for revision purposes. Liquidity treasury is mostly theory. Investment management is conceptual. If you have CFA background, especially CFA level 2, that comes in very handy. And current issues is again mostly theory, and it requires frequent revision. Okay, so this is roughly an overview of your entire syllabus in terms of what subjects you have, what weight is necessary, and on an average, how the learning experience is going to be. Okay. Now, what would be a good recommended sequence? So, this is a sequence that I've designed for you people. My rationale for building this sequence is that some candidate who's studied FRM Part 1 and then slowly he's migrating to FRM Part 2 type of content. So there has to be some sort of a linearity between the two courses. And I think that if you start with investment management, you'd feel that it's a very organic progress. So you start with investment management. This is a fun topic. It's relatively easy or moderate in terms of level of difficulty. It's exciting, so that will get you motivated to start your studies with. Then from investment management, you go to market risk. So slowly that gradual move towards FRM Part 2 type of content will happen. This is still calculation, so it will still keep you interested in the studies. And then you start dealing with all the frogs or the monsters of the syllabus. So then you take credit risk, operational and current issues. I'll recommend doing these subjects together. Especially operational risk can get very dry and very boring. So if you're combining that with current issues, then it's a little bit of fun. And then finally, liquidity and treasury management towards the exam. Okay, so this is a very broad schematics of how you can manage your studies. In terms of what time is necessary, on an average, most of the candidates agreed that 400 hours of preparation is a reasonably good time frame to prepare for FRM Part 2. So let's assume that you're preparing for a window of 4 months, right? So right now we're in July, and if you calculate the time, we're left with about 4.5 months for the November exam. So if you take a window of 4 months, that leaves you with roughly 100 hours every month. And if you want to pull off 100 hours a month, we're looking at a 24-hour, 25 hours study week. So how do you achieve those 24 hours in a week? So tentatively, you try and put in about 2 to 3 quality hours on weekdays, which is 5 days a week. That leaves you with about 10 hours here. And then you try and pull off 15 hours over weekends, right? So you can split it as 7.5, maybe on Saturday and Sunday each. That gives you additional 15. So you do 25 hours every week. That turns into 400 hours a month. And that should get you a reasonable 400 hour of preparation. Now, how do you want to allocate the time? So I took the calculation of number of hours of videos, which are there on FinTree system. number of pages which are there in GARP or Schwezer, and the level of difficulty. And I applied some sort of a rating mechanism on it. And then based on that, I came up with this sort of time allocation. That on an average, this would be a very optimum allocation of your time. And then what I did is I took this and I converted that into a month-wise planning in terms of how many subjects or which subjects can be done in which month. So today is 1st of July. Now this is extremely useful for November 2020 FRM Part 2 candidates. To some extent, October as well. You'll have to modify the schedule a little bit. And those candidates who are I'll be posting this video on YouTube. So those candidates who would be watching this video in future, I think you can create your own plan by making use of these percentages. So right now for us, we are taking exams in, I'm assuming we're taking exams in November. So today is 1st of July. So we get this entire July month for us to prepare. Now I've front loaded content a little bit. And I've gone slightly more aggressive. So here in the first month, we are going to try and pull off the whole of investment management and the whole of market risk. And what we have decided to do is that at the end of July, we would be conducting a test for you on these two subjects with first 70% of the readings of market risk and the investment management. Then in this month, what you want to do is you want to finish incremental credit risk. And then again in this month, we will have a test, and the test will include investment management, market risk, and credit risk, so that we don't forget what we have done in the past. Then in September end, which is the next month, these three you've already finished. You finish operational risk, you finish roughly about half of current issues. And then we will have again a cumulative test. And then somewhere around October end or maybe third week, depending on again, when we're taking the exam, you finish these subjects which have already finished, and then you try and pull off the liquidity and treasury management. Okay, so that's a rough schematics. You can modify the schedule based on your own personal circumstances, but that would give you a good idea in terms of how you want to plan for it. Then next point of discussion is going to be what study material to use, what resources to make use of. So I've again broken down your learning process into three parts: learning or acquiring the knowledge, and then revision, and then practice. So what would be learning sources? How would you be able to manage your learning? So you have access to FinTree videos. Right now we've coverage of about 60 to 70% of the syllabus, and that would increase gradually as I'll be recording new content. Then you read either GARP or you read Kaplan material. Now I get this question very frequently, that should I use the GARP material or should I use the Kaplan material? So the answer is that it depends on a few variables. Number one, how much time you have. Okay, so if you're a full-time student and you feel that you have sufficient time, then it makes sense to go through the GARP material. But if you're a working professional and you're trying to manage, your family, office, and studies together, then clearly Kaplan makes sense. And especially you can see the difference here in number of pages that I mapped here. There's roughly about 30% deduction in terms of number of pages. Plus, Kaplan also brings substantially manageable or easier language. For example, if you look at credit risk, GARP material comes out to be about 470 pages, but the Kaplan material comes out to be about 300. So that way, Kaplan gives you that incremental reduced time, but it comes at the risk of leaving out certain important pieces and oversimplified language. So therefore, again, the suggestion is, if you are a full-time student, GARP makes more sense because you would be able to invest incremental time. But if you're working and trying to manage, your job and studies together, then clearly Kaplan is a more practical solution. Another point to consider is how did you prepare for FRM Part 1? So at FRM Part 1, you used the core readings or the GARP material, then it makes sense for you to use GARP again. But if FRM Part 1, you used Kaplan or Schweizer's, then I think it makes sense to just continue because you're already familiar with the format. And then I would also be taking live sessions. These would be live online for this season. And of course, these live sessions will also be recorded and they would put on the LMS. So I've put a schedule towards the end of the presentation. I'll show it to you as I reach there. Then how do you revise, which I believe is a very important part of your preparation at FRM Part 2, especially, because there's so much of theory that comes in. So your revision can happen on two fronts. One is the FinTree juice notes that we've started preparing. We're still in the early stage. We prepared about 20-25% of the content. We would, as we progress, we would continuously be adding more notes. We don't think we'll be able to finish 100% for the November exam, but I think we should be able to reach about a reasonable 40-45% by the time we reach the end of the FRM exam this season. And for May 2021, we should have the entire 100% coverage. Then you can also prepare your own post-its, your own voice memos. I've put in some sample. I'll show them to you. And then how do you practice, right? So you've learned, you've revised the content, but how do you practice on a regular basis? So these are some of the options you have. One is the test that I would be conducting. So we'll be having 4 of these tests at the end of every month. Then the GARP mock exams, which are provided to you. Then if you have access to the GARP material, they've put in some really good examples between the topics. So you don't have practice questions at the end of the topic, at least not for all topics. But in between topics, they've put in some nice examples. And I think some of those examples are really good quality. So I'll recommend you to spend some time in practicing through the examples given inside the GARP material. And then, of course, there's a question bank available by Kaplan, which is not great. I have personally, tried using it and not been very satisfied with the quality of questions. But something is better than nothing. So if you feel that you want access to an additional question bank, I think Kaplan is one option that's available. So this is roughly in terms of what study material to use. And then finally, I'm going to talk about some tips, right? Some high value tips that will help us prepare better. So number one is maintain speed right from the beginning. This is very important because we don't want to end up in a situation where we try to be perfectionist and we spend too much of time on the first few topics that we pick up, and then we are forced to finish 70% of the syllabus in 2 months. If we do that, I think that would be a blunder. So right from the beginning, know that it's a massive syllabus and we have to pick up some decent speed so that we have reasonable coverage before we go and take the exams. Now, what will happen is when you're doing the first reading, for example, let's say you start with investment management and you would come across concepts like incremental VAR or factor theory. So there would be a few concepts which you would find difficult. You would feel that, I'm not getting hang of it. My suggestion to you is if you come across concepts like this, use those flags that you get in the stationery shop or figure out some mechanism, highlight them, give them some sort of a color code, and don't stress over them too much. Just leave them and move on to next topic. What happens is in FRM Part 2 curriculum, because certain concepts are so integrated, when you're doing subsequent readings, you realize that, oh, this is what the author was trying to say in the first reading. So what I recommend is, if possible, you try and do your study in rounds, as in the first reading and then the second reading and then the third reading. What it does is it brings that integration in your overall concepts. Then use a lot of post-its or sticky notes when you're studying. For example, there are a lot of formulas in the syllabus. You come across something, just write it on a post-it, put it on your table, let it be there for 10-15 days. So automatically your pictorial memory would remember them. Use flashcards. I'll be showing you a few samples that I have prepared for FRM Part 2. And then record your own voice memos. So we have this popular product for CFA called commuter notes, which are simply audio notes. So what you can do is you're reading something, you feel like, this is important, I want to think about it or read it again. Just create a voice memo for yourself and play it when you're commuting, or play it when you're working in the kitchen, or whenever you can. Then expect that there would be case studies on the exam. And I think this is some sort of a shift from the kind of questions you had on FRM Part 1. On FRM Part 2, repeatedly we've heard from candidates that there would be a case study followed up by 2 or 3 questions. So while you're doing your preparation, what case study does is, to the question writers, it allows them to integrate different concepts together. And therefore, doing it in rounds makes all the more sense, as in the first reading and the second reading and the third reading. So expect certain case studies on the exam. Of course, I'll be preparing a separate video for you towards the exam on some strategies. But this is one of the tips. And finally, try and pull off full-time leaves. I mean, ideally, if you can do more, that's great. But at minimum, try and put in 7 days so that you get sufficient time to revise and practice. All right, so this is roughly what I wanted to discuss, and I think I've been able to finish it in 20 minutes. I picked up some speed because I wanted to save time to do Q&A with you. My talk is over, and now it's your turn to ask me questions or queries if you have any. If you want to speak, you can raise your hand and I can try and answer them. Or if you want to put them on the chat box, that will also work. Guys, if you have any queries, just keep on posting them in the chat box, please. I'll be sharing this presentation. I'll also be uploading this in the YouTube description. Okay, first question that is come is, can we have the schedule for live sessions? Sure. So I have put this in my presentation. Today is your technically kind of the first live session. And then after that, we more or less doing classes on Thursdays, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. And at the same time, which is going to be morning 8 to 10 IST, Indian Standard Time. And all these sessions I would anyways be recording, because that's the primary motive, to record new content. So in case if you can attend live, that's great. You'd be able to participate live and ask questions. It will also keep you disciplined. But if you think that it's not possible, it's perfectly all right. I've also put in some sample notes on the juice notes that we've started preparing for FRM Part 2. I've just put in a few screenshots. These are already available under your login for you to download. And throughout the season, we would be revising some of these juice notes and adding more and more to the list. Syllabus is mostly, second question I'm getting from Lakshmikant. He's asking, syllabus is mostly theoretical. So why only 80 questions this time? That's a great question, Lakshmikant. I think 80 questions are good enough. Because again, I always think of exams as a small sample out of your entire population, right? Population is your syllabus. So is 80 a good enough sample? I think so, considering the overall schematic of FRM Part 2. On the exam, the questions have been known to be, especially for FRM Part 2, practitioner level. So if you have 80 practitioner level questions, I think that's a good enough sample size to test whether a candidate really knows the subject or not. How to manage time for October attempt? So I prepared this schedule for considering November in mind. If you're writing in October, then you'd probably want to save those additional 20 odd days. So I have put in the percentage, put them on an Excel file, and try and preparing your own plan. So even in future, if someone is watching this video, let's say if you have 6 months, the most important statistic for you to make your own plan is this. So what I did is I just typed this onto an Excel and then took the number of weeks and did proportionate calculations. So you can do that for yourself. How much of the the sessions will be covered by me. Okay, Sanjay. Uh, so what I'm doing with you for this season, let me open that Excel file. Okay, by the way, these are my percentage calculations that I did, that I was talking about some time back. So what am I teaching this season? So if you'd see this uh, Excel file here, this is your entire syllabus. Now this Excel file is already uploaded on the FinTree website. It's also available inside your LMS, and I'll probably share it on your broadcast as well. So what I'm doing with you this season is all these readings that you see in purple, which is entire liquidity and treasury management. So once these videos are done, all the sections that you see in the blue, these are the sections where you would see my videos available. So most of my video coverage is on market risk. Then we will have the whole of liquidity and treasury management, and we will have risk management and investment management, and then certain readings on current issues and little bit in operational risk. Uh, what you see in the green are the videos which are being recorded by one of our instructors. His name is Bhupendra. So all the green sections is videos recorded by Bhupendra, and all the yellow sections is where we don't have video coverage yet, though we have juice notes for some of them. And this is what I would be recording from November 2020 to May 2021. So by May 2021, I think I should be able to reach about 90-95% of coverage of videos of my own under FRM Part 2. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a lot of questions. I'll try and answer them one by one. Test will be available on the forum. Solutions would be posted with test. Yes, Karvit. Test will be available on the FinTree LMS under the monthly test section, along with a separate PDF for solutions. You should be able to download them and solve them whenever you want. We would be posting them as per the schedule that I discussed today. Will I be taking all the sessions? So Hitesh, I just answered that query of yours. How to cover credit book? It's more complicated. I agree. Credit risk, there are certain topics which are difficult, especially when it comes around Merton model and some of those calculations. But how I look at credit risk is there are two pieces to it, right? One piece which is theory and which is reasonably manageable. What you need to do is give it a good reading, make notes or post-its, and just revise them. The second part is calculation, and I think that is where you might have calculation. You might have little bit of difficulty. So try and work with examples which are given in the GARP or in the Kaplan material. And if you feel that there are certain formulas which are too abstract for you, then simply leave them. Because what is because you always have to analyze in terms of cost benefit ratio. So if you feel that there are certain learning outcomes which are just too difficult, it's perfectly okay to leave. So what I recommend for FRM Part 2, do not leave any reading. That's a crime. But within reading, there are certain low-hanging fruits, like some parts which are very easy. And then there are some too complicated areas. If you feel it's too difficult for you, it's perfectly okay to leave them. Okay. Will there be any juice notes for market risk and credit risk? So basically what strategy we've started following is we first doing juice notes for all the sections where there are no videos available right now. So which basically means the next set of juice notes will come in here. This regulation, which is in operational risk resiliency. Then some juice notes will come for credit risk, especially on the areas where we don't have a video coverage. And after that, then we will start with the remaining parts of market risk. Next question is from Suad. He's saying, hi Utkarsh, thank you for the session. I have Wiley books for FRM Part 2, which are a total of 2 books. What's your advice? Shall I continue with it? So Suad, I'm not really sure about Wiley's quality because I never got an opportunity to review them. but while he's a reputed publisher, so I don't see any reason why the quality will not be good. But I have personally never seen those books. Next question is coming from Arnav, that will there be subjective questions on the exam? So I would say not subjective, but there would be questions which would require you to take decision, if that's what you're asking. Yes, so there would be questions which will require you to take decisions, especially in the operational risk type of areas. Right? So operational risk area, they might say this is a bank, and this is how the system is, and this is what the management decided, and what do you think it's correct, not correct, or something like that. So there would be an element of subjectivity there on the exam. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just bombarded with questions here. I'll try and answer them one by one. Sir, as you said, at the end of every month, you would be conducting a test. So will this be enough for the exam in terms of number of questions practiced? No, Pranay. It will not be enough. You need more practice questions. Unfortunately, in FRM Part 2, there are not many prep providers, and there are not many question banks. So, which basically means, we work with what we already have. I'm trying to write a few questions for the topics that I'll be teaching this season. I'll probably try and write 3 or 4 questions for every topic, but I think that's what we have at this moment. Do the case studies require subjective response or they're MCQ? No, no, no. All of them are MCQ. And I'm not saying all the questions on FRM Part 2 are going to be case study. I'm saying that there would be some case studies, but they would still be MCQ. You'll not be required to write them. But uh, because it will come in some sort of a, and I should not call them case studies, I think caselets, right? A small caselets, like let's say half a page or one pager. But because of a case study, the questions would be integrated with each other. The concepts would be integrated, and that's what makes FRM Part 2 a little challenging. What is the probability of exam happening in November, considering COVID situation? I don't know, Sanjay. I mean, I have no mechanism to answer that question. I hope that exams happen, because it's very frustrating that you prepare for an exam and then suddenly exams get cancelled. So let's hope things work out. What's the expected cutoff for each subject? Kasturi, I don't know that. Uh, what I can guess is, so there are two parts to it. Number one, what is an overall aggregate cutoff? So I would say, and again, that's a guess, but I would say if you're able to score 60%, that means if you get 48 questions right out of 80, I would say there's a decent probability you'd get through. If you score 70%, that means if you get 56 questions right out of 80, you're more or less passing the exam. Okay, so target should be 70% of the questions is what we want to get right. And is there a subject-wise cutoff? I would say uh, I would say that if you score really good in 3 subjects, but really, really bad in 3, there's a good chance you would not pass. So, which means there is no individual subject cutoff, but I'm sure GARP algorithm also considers the fact that people are not leaving out a subject an option. So, which means let's, just on the side of being conservative, let's assume that there is a subject-wise cutoff, and let's assume there's an aggregate cutoff, and let's benchmark it to subject-wise cutoff to 60% and an aggregate cutoff to 70%, just to simplify the preparation strategy. Okay, next question. For the recorded videos, can we have a link against each topic, including links for juice notes? Prasad, yes. If you go on the FinTree LMS, that's how we've organized. Let me show you how FinTree LMS is organized. Yeah. So go to FRM Part 2. So FRM Part 2, let's say you want to look at investment and risk management, and you want to look at the concept on alpha. So this is your learning outcome A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So all your videos are mapped based on the learning outcomes. So my internet is I'm operating on a low bandwidth now, but this video will pop up eventually. And if you want to download Juice Notes now, some of these readings right now you would find my own handwritten presentations. These handwritten presentations are a predecessor to Juice Notes. And what I generally do is I send this to my content design team, and then they design and convert them to Juice Notes. So wherever Juice Notes are not being designed right now, you would find presentations like these, which are same as Juice Notes, except that Juice Notes would be better designed and more graphical in nature, but the content is going to remain same, right? So everything is available for a particular topic on the same page for you. So it becomes easier for you to manage your studies. Okay. Will the monthly test be available to everyone, including online students? Yes. So for this season and even in the next season, uh, I am not distinguishing between a classroom and an online candidate. Uh, what I'm planning to do is just have a single product on the website, which is an online product, and all the sessions that I'll be doing, live sessions, those would be live online over a Zoom platform, and they would be available to online students as well. So at least till May 2021 exams, we're not really doing a separate classroom program. It's going to be a simple online program on the FinTree's website. Okay, I think I've answered most of the queries. Uh, we have another 7-8 minutes if you want to ask anything. If you have any other queries or if you want to speak, you can raise your hands now. I can take some audio queries as well. You would see a raise hand feature somewhere there. Hi, Jyotian. You should be able to speak now. You have to unmute yourself and it should work.
Yeah. Hi, Utkarsh. The thing is, I just wanted to know that, like in FRM Part 1 and I was preparing, you said that we can always train our hand. Like, when we have a lot of questions, it's easier that we train our hands to do the work, which I understand. So in FRM Part 2, since I was preparing actually for the May, which did not happen. So it said that we have a lot of subjective ones compared to the calculations and the problem questions that are there. So for subjective questions that we see, uh, how would you expect us to prepare? Like more focus on the conceptual basis, like and then implementing it in the cases or the questions that are given. Like how, because like for a person like me, subjective questions are a little issue.
Yeah, I agree. So I think what you're trying to say is calculations or versus theory questions, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So so I also agree because what happens is when you do calculations, for example, let's say you want to value swap, there are 5 or 6 different ways in which you can do it. Once you practice 3 questions on each type, that's let's say total 15 questions, you're more or less covered, right? And then you have this muscle memory that you were referring to, or I generally refer to. With FRM Part 2, unfortunately, that doesn't work. There are certain pieces where you're very reasonably confident that this calculation will show up. For example, in investment and risk management, there's certain questions on factors that would generally show up. Questions on your some VAR written calculations will generally show up. Uh, but apart from that, there is going to be a lot of theory, and there's going to be an application based theory, right? And this is where I feel uh, there would be application based theory. This is where I feel having some practical experience comes in extremely handy. But as a student, if you don't have experience, what do you do? So first finish the syllabus. That's very important, right? So go through Kaplan, Schwezer, go through all the FinTree videos once. Then start with the second reading. And let's say you're reading something on some BIS document. Let's say some document on stress testing, and you feel that you're not still not satisfied. Then go on the internet, read the original document, read some forums. There are plenty of discussion that happens on different online forums on this. So read through it and try to build a more broader perspective, so that when you've read, because if there's no practical experience, there is no substitute to it. So how do you try to reach to that level is try and use internet as much as you can. Another good idea would be if you start discussing these concepts with some of your peers or study mates. I think that would also work in to some extent. But I agree. FRM Part 2 that ways is a substantially more challenging exam just because it has less number of number crunching and more of subjective or theoretical concepts, and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay. Anyone else would like to? Hopefully, I answered your question, Jyotsiana. Anyone else would like to speak? You can just raise your hands. I'll try and answer them. Okay, I'm going to take last two questions. Let the first one come from Sanjay.
Hi Utkarsh, thank you for the session. It's really very helpful.
Sure,
Just
Sanjay.
wanted
Happy
to
to help.
know. So I had prepared for May, and unfortunately because of the COVID, the exam didn't happen. So I went through the GARP material already once. So now if I'm want to go member attempt, do I have to go through the GARP material again, or can I just refer Kaplan and get it through?
Okay. You know what? You're a nightmare for most of the other candidates. Because suddenly, I'm sure other people attending class, attending session today would feel, oh, oh my God, this guy is already done with car. But I think you're in a comfortable situation. So that's a good news. What I'll suggest is now Kaplan will do the job. If you've already purchased Kaplan or Schwezer notes, Kaplan should do the job. And then you can just browse through GARP and just see what sections are not covered in Kaplan. Because one of the things Kaplan tends to do is it tends to conveniently skip, whatever it doesn't like. And if you see some
Correct.
of my
Yeah.
videos
Correct.
that I recorded last season, uh, I generally cover all my sessions from GARP material. So there were a lot of pieces that I came across which were just not there in choices. So just keep GARP once in front of you, and whatever pieces are not there, you can probably make a small note of them on top of your choices and just revise through choices. I think then you're covered.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, guys, I have question for. I have time for one last question, and then I'm going to take your permission. And we would be again meeting tomorrow, same time. My team will reach out to you in terms of how do you set up. They would be validating your accounts, and then we would be continuing with the same link for every session going forward. Varsha is asking, I have dropped mail to GARP regarding my membership expiration, and I got a reply that we don't need it for the exam, but I won't get other benefits. What should I do? Uh, I don't know, Varsha. I think I've seen most of the candidates don't bother about membership too much. I mean, till the time you're not applying for charter. So I think it's okay if you don't have it. I don't see that being a big problem. Kasturi, for queries, doubts, or topics covered live, can we post this to you? How do we do that? So Kasturi, okay, not covered live. Okay, so Kasturi, what we're doing is we're building forums under FRM Part 2. There would be one forum available for each reading. And all the queries that you have, you can start posting your queries on the forums, and all other candidates would be able to reply them, and we would also be replying. My support team will also be replying to those queries. I will not be able to respond to any of the queries on WhatsApp or email because I have a really strict calendar that I'm operating on. I'm teaching a few more courses. So the query resolution works through the forums with the help of my team. That's how you can work. And all the sessions that I'm teaching live, you can ask as many questions as you want to during the live session, either on the chat box or you can just talk to me. Will there be any mock exams in November? Yes, we'll try and have 3 mocks. So once your syllabus is over, we'll try and have some mock exams there. Okay, so I think that's it from my side. I hope you found this session useful. I will be uploading this presentation on the YouTube description, and I would be sharing you the link of the YouTube video. So please like and comment on the video. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. And we would be starting with the first topic on liquidity and treasury management. Thank you very much. Bye.